On tonight's edition of Northwest Reports.
He knows who I am, he knows where I live, and he knows that I have a 2-year-old daughter.
8 years ago, Sue Cunningham told Northwest Reports her fears about the teenager who killed her foster daughter.
Would you do it again?
You know, I ask myself that question a lot. And so I say to myself, well, if I'm going to do it again, I got to do it so that I don't, leave anything behind.
8 years after he knifed Tina Marie Jones to death, the Oregon Parole Board considers letting Michael Carroll out of prison.
And I think he's a very severe threat to any child.
On the eve of his parole hearing, Northwest Reports takes you back inside Mike Carroll's fatal fantasy. Someone set fires in the Northwest and destroyed millions of dollars worth of buildings. But investigators say these fires burned thousands of degrees hotter than they should have. One theory says a high-tech arsonist has been making and selling solid rocket fuel to propel these fires. Northwest Reports correspondent Teresa Luce reports tonight. And Jerry Frank takes us to the Oregon coast for a look at its most popular new attraction. Tonight on Northwest Reports. Good evening and welcome to Northwest Reports for April 26th. I'm Lars Larson. 8 years ago, we took you inside the mind of a teenager whose sick fantasies led him to murder a 13-year-old Southeast Portland girl. Tomorrow morning, Omar Michael Carroll goes before the Oregon Parole Board. Tonight, Northwest Reports takes you back to look at the teenager called Mike and at Omar, the adult convict who says Oregon should let him go, despite his fatal fantasy 8 years ago.
Days like Tina's birthday is really hard because it makes me, like, she would have been 21 last December. And so a lot of times I think, oh, wow, I wonder what she'd be like. And so that's really tough.
Sue Cunningham had only days to get to know her foster daughter, Tina Marie Jones, back in 1985. But more than 8 years later, the memories and the questions have not faded.
And sometimes I'll see someone on the street, and they'll remind me of her, and I'll think, wow, I wonder if Tina would look like that. I wonder if Tina'd have kids. So that makes it hard.
I would like to get out of here tomorrow and start building a good reputation in the community again.
Omar Michael Carroll III lives on the opposite side of the state. Carroll met Sue Cunningham back in 1985 when he was a teenager, just like Tina.
He sat in my living room on a Sunday afternoon and conversed with me, fully knowing that he intended on going down and murdering Tina Marie. Why should I believe what this guy says? I don't. I have no confidence in him at all, in what he says or what he says he'll do or anything.
4 days after Christmas that year, Mike, as he was then known, met Tina in a Southeast Portland park, talked to her mother, then took her for a walk and stabbed her to death.
Should they be afraid of you?
Their fear of me going back to their daughter and trying to get her is understandable for the situation. But I will not go back to hunt them down. I am sure I will not commit another crime.
You'd like to have the parole board reduce your sentence?
I don't think there's a person in here that wouldn't like to have the parole board reduce their sentence.
Tonight, a look back at Northwest Report's very first documentary, an interview with convicted killer Michael Carroll and how his fatal fantasy became real. When Mike Carroll was 7 or 8, he says his sister brought home a book called The Shadow of the Night.
Tell me about the book, The Shadow of the Night.
What do you want to know about it?
What's it about?
Well, it's basically about a guy who, a psychotic, who does this kind of stuff.
What kind of stuff?
The kind of stuff that I did, killing women.
Mike told a psychologist who examined him after the crime that he read the book 1,000 times since he picked it up. It is the story of a killer who first sodomizes his victims, then stabs them to death. All of the victims are women. Mike found it sexually exciting.
And when I first read it, I thought, gosh, this guy is a jerk. You know, this guy's really crazy. And after a while, I got to reading it so much that it became part of my thinking.
It also started Mike writing. His first fantasy character was named Razor. He was patterned after the killer in The Shadow of the Knife.
Are some of the characters in those things that you write about, are they violent?
Some of them are. See, I've got two types of characters. I got the good guys and the bad guys. The bad guys are violent, and then...
Tell me about the bad guys.
Well, I call them the League of Doom, because I had this good side and this bad side of me, you know, and I've been struggling with it for a long time, and I think that was a reflection of my bad side.
His discrimination of reality wasn't very good, and I think the distinction between fantasy and reality from time to time became quite blurred for Michael.
Are they real to you?
Not, well, they are to me, but I know that well, they better not exist. If they exist, we got problems.
Tina Marie Jones had a childhood that was, in some ways, remarkably similar to that of Mike Carroll.
Well, Tina was a youngster that had been molested by several family members. She'd been the product of a broken home, had parents that didn't care for her very much in terms of being there and taking care of her.
At about age 10, Tina's problems finally came to the attention of the state, which put her in the Christie School, where emotionally troubled children get the help they need.
And over the space of the time she was in Christie, had made enormous strides. She was learning to trust people again. And of course that loss of the ability to trust is one of the most damaging impacts of sexual abuse, particularly by people that are supposed to be trustworthy in your life. And at the time she went from Christie School and into foster care, she was considered one of their great success stories. She's a delightful child.
Tina was 13 going on 8. She had just turned 13 like 3 weeks before she was killed. She was really mature just because she'd been deprived a lot. She had no sense of time. She didn't know that there were 24 hours in a day or what noon meant, things like that. But she was very sincere, very eager. She had said, at one point she said, "Oh, you must be really, really smart. I want you to teach me everything you know." And so I said, "Well, you will learn a lot. I will teach you a lot."
So I thought she was on the threshold of healing many of the wounds. She was beginning to blossom, and she was described as blossoming in the foster home. She had in my mind, she was a bright, cheerful child, and she had a world of potential.
At about the time Tina Marie Jones became part of the Cunningham family, Mike Carroll's problems came to a crisis. They'd really begun to emerge with notes he wrote to girls in junior high school.
Yeah, I did write her a note, and basically expressed a desire to have her discipline me.
The theme of the two letters that he wrote were to girls, in which he was inviting them to participate in sex. There were a couple of instances in which it became known to the school that Michael had been passing notes that were very explicit and very sexual.
Violent?
I think they suggest violence, yes.
What did the school do?
Well, I'm not really sure. I don't know for certain. I get the impression that there was a meeting. It was interesting in speaking with the parents. They didn't recall such a meeting, but there's a suggestion in the file that a meeting was had with the parents, and they talked it over with them. But I don't think much came of it.
Was he having problems in junior high?
I don't think any more than normal.
Did he talk about some of the notes that he wrote that Dr. Bolstead talks about?
Oh, he may have, but if he did, he didn't say very much. Certainly not enough for us to get concerned about it.
I think there was a quality to the notes that I recall reading that I found fairly alarming in my reading of them. I think historically in this society we have tended to not pay enough attention to signs that suggest sexual abuse, sexual offending.
Those notes were still on Mike Carroll's mind 3 years later in high school.
At one time he talked to me about notes he had written
The ones in junior high?
in junior high.
Tell me about those.
Well, I can't tell you much. I wanted to get at what he was really getting to. I didn't pay attention. I mean, I didn't ask him what was said in the notes. My main concern was what he was feeling. You know, why was he even mentioning this to me now?
What I told him was that I was having these excessive sexual thoughts.
He had very well developed fantasies about girlfriends, but he didn't have any girlfriends.
Kids come in quite often with sexual problems. They want to have a girlfriend. Everybody else has a girlfriend. They want to have a girlfriend, or they want to have a boyfriend, and so on and so forth.
And they thought it was just a typical high school thing.
Yeah.
Did it seem like he knew he had a problem and
Yeah.
wanted to get some help?
Yeah, he really did. Because like I said, he came in more often. He came in probably every other day the last 2 weeks before Christmas.
Her notes indicated that Michael talked to her about having fantasies or feelings like he wanted to harm someone, perhaps kill someone.
A member of his family?
I believe there were references to a member of his family.
Initially, I had said that I wanted to kill somebody.
He was standing at my door, and that last week is really hectic. We have a Carroll contest, and it's really hectic. And I didn't have a lot of time, but for some reason, I felt like I better drop everything else and talk to him. And after he came in, I can't remember, it seemed like it was something to the effect that, have you ever felt like killing somebody?
He was consumed with fantasies, particularly aggressive fantasies, and I think over time his ability to contain those fantasies through a structure of logic and rational judgment began disintegrating.
When I started thinking about doing this to any girl I met, then I started thinking, no, this is getting really serious. I wanted help, but I couldn't tell people how violent these were.
Tina Marie Jones was spending her first Christmas with her new family, the one she was to live with for only 9 days. They took her skating at Oaks Amusement Park, only a short distance from where she would later die. They helped her write her first letter to Santa Claus. She asked for a radio, some makeup, clothes, and a camera.
So you began looking for somebody to participate in your experiment with?
Well, yeah. I wasn't thinking of anybody in particular.
How come you chose Tina?
Well, she was the only youth of mine that was even close to my age that was in the park.
Oh, she was walking a couple of dogs that became rambunctious, were difficult to control. Mike Carroll offered to help her and perhaps helped her to get the dogs under control. Asked her if she wanted to go for a walk in Oaks Bottom. She said she'd need to ask her foster parent.
Came bursting in the front door going, I finally made a friend, and he wants to go hiking. And I said, oh, well, where is this friend? Well, he was waiting down at Mary's. He lived 3 houses down. And she was going to meet him down there. And I said, well, you go tell this friend he needs to come down here and talk to me. So she brought him down, and he sat right there, and Tina went upstairs and changed, and I was feeding Kimberly breakfast or lunch in the high chair there. And we chatted for 10, 15 minutes. He seemed to be real nice, real straight, real polite. He told me about himself, told me his name, told me we went to school.
When Tina came down, we went to the park and went down the trail. We went off the trail and into the swamp